Day 11 of Japan is over, and I'm here to reflect about something I've been thinking about in terms of Japanese language schools, how Japanese is taught in those schools, as well as like a conversation I had with my friend who's also a Japanese language teacher that I had during like a cafe. We were just talking about it. And I think the biggest takeaway from our conversation and what I'm figuring out is that the system in place at the moment, and again, this is just for the language school I'm going to, but I'm assuming it's taught in a similar way in other ones, is that there's a really strong focus on writing and things related to writing instead of speaking and listening as much. Probably more so listening than speaking, but I've noticed that a lot of the also, it's only been 1 week since language school has started, but the structure seems to be the same across each day for the most part. And I'm noticing that speaking is like one of the least prominent exercises during class. So usually what happens is we have about like 15 people in class, and the sensei calls on each person to speak like an example sentence or the answers they came up with for an exercise. And it's like one by one, each person takes a bit of time, maybe like 3 minutes to get across everyone in the class, but you kind of only say it once. Ideally, there would be less people in the class, or the most ideal would be just you, and you're saying everything. That way you get the most practice. So I suppose the best way to make up for that, compensate for that, is to say and speak as much as you can while the others are speaking. Perhaps copy their sentences, or just mimic what they're saying while they're saying it. Just anything that allows you to practice more speaking. Because I think that's one of the most important elements that's just really not present in the language class at the moment. And my friend, who's also a language teacher, she said that a lot of her students are content with just like understanding and being able to read and listen and all that stuff, but they don't speak as much. So she really agrees that she wants more people to speak. She also mentioned how in Japan, a lot of the educational system is based around writing. And that's probably why it's the same way for the language schools. It's a lot of writing and repetitive writing as well, that just kind of just burns time instead of actually teaching you anything. So from here on, what I'm planning to do is a lot less writing and more speaking. This is going to be highly dependent on your school and how you're learning, but this is what I'm going to do from now on. So I suppose take this tip with a grain of salt depending on your system, but I'm planning on just reading out loud the question, as well as answering out loud the question, giving an answer to the question out loud, and not actually writing it. So basically some questions from the homework as well as the exercises, they ask you to just repeat the forms. So for instance, today we had exercises surrounding the dictionary form plus koto ga dekimasu or dekimasen. So basically that just means like you're turning a verb into its noun form, into a noun by turning it into the dictionary form, which is called jisokei. So for instance, let's say I can speak some Japanese, essentially is the translation. So Nihongo nasu koto ga dekimasu. So hanasu is like hanashimasu, which means to talk. And then if you turn it into its dictionary form, hanasu, and you add koto, that turns it into sort of like a noun. And then you can add like something after that. And then Nihongo is Japanese. So Nihongo hanasu koto ga dekimasu, which means essentially I can like speak Japanese, or roughly translates to that. It has the same meaning as Nihongo hanasemasu. I asked the sensei and he said it's pretty much the same, like onaji is how he answered. So a lot of the exercises basically just use different verbs and situations so that you practice that sort of grammar point. And a lot of it requires a lot of repetitive writing and then just adding that grammar point. So instead of writing it all down, like the exercises like you're supposed to, what I'm doing instead in class from now on is I'm just gonna keep saying it out loud and coming up with the answer out loud instead of writing it. That way I actually practice what I find to be the most essential, which is speaking and listening comprehension versus writing. And yeah, just writing, because I do read it and read it out loud. So I'm still practicing reading, speaking, and listening. It's just the writing aspect that I'm not practicing because I honestly don't think I'll ever need it. because I type using speech to text all the time for Japanese, and I have never really needed writing ever. So instead of practicing something I will never use, I will continuously practice something I will use. And of course, I'm pretty sure eventually the sensei is going to ask me like why I'm not writing anything. So I'll have to find a way to either explain my method or just show that I know what I'm doing. And luckily for us, we don't have to turn in homework. So that means as long as I go through the homework and do my speaking practice and comprehension practice, then I'll be fine, because the whole point of learning is just to understand. It's not to have written it out and then consider it done, you know? And I think the funny part is my friend was telling me that if I were going to advance to like a Japanese university or anything like that, or job, she said that I would essentially be a bad student because of this, and we were joking around about it, so she's not like serious, because the whole point is learning. And as long as I learn, then I'm good. But that's essentially what I spent a lot of day 11 doing, is sort of in Japanese class, thinking a lot, figuring out that this is not very optimal. I do think that there's a lot of better ways to learn Japanese, to be honest. Like if you're the type of person who can self-study very well, learning off of Genki, because Genki had a lot of the similar grammar points that we're learning now, and actually taking the time to go through every chapter. There's English instructions. There are things that are very clear compared to everything here at the language school, which is Japanese. It can get confusing because you're kind of translating the directions as well as the explanations, and that can take extra time that's not really necessary. So I think for me, I'm actually going to continue my Genki practice in tandem with the language school, just because I feel like that will benefit my speaking more, especially since I think my speaking level is much higher than what we're studying at the moment. But of course, these are just my thoughts regarding the specific language school I'm going to and how I'm learning. And I do want to close off with a couple thoughts regarding school in general, because school for me, I've always been, I guess, a bad student in the sense that I dozed off in class. I did not like lectures, never really paid attention, but I was fortunate enough to be able to self-study well. So I read a lot of textbooks and just studied the material on my own and managed to basically get straight A's in high school and graduate a year early in college. So I'm definitely not like a slacker. It's just the classroom environment was just not suited for me. And in a way, being back in school, I can feel myself sort of moving towards that point where you just do the bare minimum to pass the class instead of actually wanting to learn the material. And I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I feel like there's something inherent in the way classrooms are run that make you feel like you just want to do that bare minimum. I don't know what it is. It's like you're presented with a structure where you have these questions and sort of like benchmarks that you need to pass. And as long as you pass those benchmarks and you're able to answer those questions, you're rewarded with a good grade or a good remark like, 上手です or とても上手です, which I got today and I felt happy about it. But when that happens, it's like, oh, you're satisfied with what you're doing, but you're forgetting the point of the lesson somewhat. The whole point is essentially to be able to understand the whole language and be able to speak it well and converse with native speakers. And when you're in a system, in a classroom where most of it is you being rewarded for saying simple structured sentences or doing well with the writing and whatnot, then it's sort of not counter necessarily, but it's sort of like tangent to the main goal. So for me, I'm asking myself to keep my eye on the ball, to keep my eye on the goal, and just make sure I'm doing all I can do to actually learn the language as efficiently and as effectively as possible without getting distracted or losing focus because of a system that I want to be like lazy about and like just let them guide me, you know? But I do feel like putting in the effort to actually truly think about the most effective and efficient manner of doing things in the end will be better. But we are at the very beginning of this journey of learning the language as well as language school. So perhaps a lot of these thoughts might just be jumping the gun, but we'll find out as we go along. Just initial thoughts and impressions. Okay, hopefully you can glean some insight from what I talked about, and Thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next one.